Yes, esteemed viewers, we welcome you to yet another fantastic program we would call Health Matter, because health really matter, and they talk say health now wealth. That is why we design this program so that people go to learn about things we get to do with health. And you know, as we dey take do am, yes, so our in-house doctor, man, we sabi everything we get to do with health. And they talk about Dr. Bats. You're welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Thank
Good
you.
morning.
Slimy
sir.
Boni.
Of them
I'm
all.
very well. Good morning.
Welcome
you
once
very much.
again.
Abi.
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you very much. Good morning once again, viewers at home and around the world. Today we are looking at a very important health topic, as we always do on WAP TV. My name's again Dr. Bartholomew Tochukwu Febuna. I'm the medical director of Grace Valley Medical Center here in Lagos. This morning we'll be looking at, in view of World Malaria Day that is coming up 12 days from now, precisely on the 25th of April 2019. A major event will be taking place in Paris, in France. Okay, so in view of World Malaria Day that is coming up, we'll be looking at malaria. Okay, now, as a word of introduction, what is malaria? We all know what malaria is. Everybody in this part of the world must have heard about malaria in one way or the other. Okay, so it's a term that is common in our environment. So malaria is an infectious disease that is caused by parasites. Okay, the name of the microorganism that causes malaria is called Plasmodium. There are over 200 species of Plasmodium, but we'll be looking at about 5 of them that are of significant health importance that affects human. Talking about Plasmodium falciparum, Plasmodium ovale, Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium malariae, and the less known one, Plasmodium knowlesi. Usually is a form of a zoonotic disease, okay, but it affects human in just only a little significant health importance is attached to it because it is the lowest, okay. Having talked about that, I want to talk about a historical perspective and as well as the affectation of malaria all over the world.
Okay.
Now, malaria is a disease that has been with humans, that has been with mankind since over 50 to 100,000 years ago. It didn't just start today, okay? It was causing havoc all over the world over the centuries and still do till this very time, okay? Now, I also want to talk about efforts that have been made in time past in trying to combat this disease that is highly preventable and curable, yet it kills people
It's
in
deadly.
large numbers,
Yeah.
okay? Now, before that, let me just give us a little bit of an epidemiology before I go back to the history. It's being said that more than half of the world's population today are affected by malaria in one way or the other. And there are countries that are regarded as high-burdened malaria countries. Of course, Nigeria is one of them. Now, over time, there were a lot of improvements and achievements that have been made by the global community in trying to combat malaria over the years. But in the last 3 years, it has stalled. Yes. Bringing about the increment that we are now seeing again in malaria prevalence. For instance, in the year 2017, 119 million people were said to have been affected by malaria.
Just in Nigeria or globally?
No, globally.
Okay.
Not even 119. 219 million people were said to have been affected by malaria globally in the year 2017. And out of this figure, 90% of them, over 90% of them, were in the African sub-region. And this 90% that were in the African sub-region, more than half of them were in just 10 countries in Africa. And of course, Nigeria is one of the topmost countries that are affected by malaria.
Wow.
Okay. Permit me to also point out that every 2 minutes, malaria kills a child.
Every 2 minutes.
Every 2 minutes. That is to say that in 1 hour, 30 children would have died as a result of malaria. And of course, it's happening more in this part of the world. Now, a little bit of the historical perspective. In the year 1640, the Indian population in Peru actually were using some form of local herbs to actually cure what looks like malaria. It didn't have the name malaria at that time. What looks like malaria at that time. Okay, but over time, they discovered that what they were using was actually a tincture of the bark of a tree, known as, what's the name of the tree? I will remember it shortly now. Now, this particular tree, the bark of that tree was used, the extract was later discovered to contain what we today use in the treatment of malaria, talking about...
Say na we they call it gidongoyaro.
Can I say
Dongoyaro.
we
No,
get,
it's not dongoyaro, but we
Can I
have
say
similar
get
things.
somewhere that they cook for Nigeria, they tell you, say, may you drink.
Yeah, sure. Every country actually has one form of traditional ways through which over the ages they've been using to treat and then try to fight this. But the ones that are of significant importance is the one we are going to talk about today. Okay, so the bark of this tree was used as herbs that the traditional Peru population were using to cure malaria. Over time, in the year 1640, it was discovered that that bark of tree actually contained the drug that is known as quinine.
Because I want to ask, what be the relationship between malaria and queen?
Because everything, I remember those days, they had to even stop us from taking some queen because of reaction. Yeah.
Because queen was too much in treatment. And some people, they
yeah, they were reacting to.
Then talking about this quinine that was discovered at that time, they were not able to name it until sometime in the year 1802, where some 2 French gentlemen, scientists or chemists by name Joseph, 2 of them actually were named Joseph. The other one is Pierre Joseph, and then the other one was Joseph
Joseph something.
Joseph Conte or something like that. They were actually the ones that discovered that this drug, this tree, the bark of this tree actually contained what is today regarded as quinine. So they were the ones that named that drug quinine. And in the year 1677, Jesuits introduced it into Europe. And of course, London and of course the London Pharmacopoeia adopted that drug as a widely used drug for treatment of malaria in the year 1677. And I can assure you, I can tell you that up till now, up till this very date, quinine still has a place in the treatment of malaria. Okay, so over time, other drugs started coming up. Drugs like chloroquine took over after a while, and then because of the emergence of drug resistance, chloroquine too gave way to what we now use today, majorly as the artemisinin combination therapy. Okay, but the artemisinin too has a story behind it. It came from a plant in China, so it was actually a Chinese scientist that, alongside her team, was a woman who actually discovered the extract in Chinese herbs. Okay, the name of the woman is Tu Yu.
Okay.
Tu Yu. She actually received. She actually was Tu Yu. She was actually given a Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine in the year 2015. Okay, now that plant extract became the bedrock of the artemisinin combination therapy that we use today, which is, of course, today is the first-line treatment for malaria. That is not to say that some other drugs are no longer relevant. They're still relevant till today, but these are important historical achievements that have helped to, in our fight to eliminate this deadly and yet preventable and curable disease. The theme of this year's World Malaria Day is Zero Malaria Starts With Me. Zero malaria starts with me. So, what does that mean? Now, it kind of brings it upon us to know that when it comes to malaria, individual efforts are equally required. Not just what the government can do for you. Okay? In the sense that you need to protect your family, you need to protect your loved ones. Okay? Now, the mainstay of prevention for the mainstay of malaria prevention today is what we all know about. Okay? Now, in the sense that there's anybody here who will say he or she has not heard about insecticide-treated nets. Okay? Now, that has helped. The emergence of insecticide-treated nets as well as some other preventive measures have actually helped over the decades, over the years, to actually bring about improvement in terms of prevention. Okay? But in the last 3 years, all of that have stalled in the sense that we now have an increase from what it used to be years back. What are the symptoms of malaria? How do we know we have malaria?
Outside the regulars that we know.
Yes, I'm telling you. It's difficult to actually say whether one has malaria or not, going by the symptoms alone. Okay? Usually it comes with flu-like symptoms. Okay. That can actually be found in some other disease entities, not just malaria. But generally speaking, when we talk about malaria symptoms, we have to mention things like fever is key, headache.
Constant or just regular?
Yes. Generalized body pains.
Okay.
Oftentimes, we have abdominal symptoms, abdominal pains, nausea and vomiting. Okay. Now, depending on the part of the body that has been affected as well, because sometimes malaria can affect the central nervous system, can affect the brain. If that happens, such a person will end up with what we refer to as cerebral malaria. Okay. Now, when it affects the cerebellum, the person comes down with cerebral malaria. And of course, the symptoms that you have will be neurological symptoms. Okay? You could have things like, I actually don't know how to simplify this word. You could have things like opisthotonus. Okay? And nystagmus. Now, opisthotonus is actually an angulation that involves the head, the neck, and the spine that usually you see the person can be bending, the sick person can be bending towards the back. You can actually see such presentation also in tetanus. Okay? They could have nystagmus, which has to do with repetitive, rapid movements, uncontrolled, repetitive, rapid movements of the eyes. I'm talking about neurological symptoms that someone who has cerebral malaria can actually come down with. Okay? And of course, they could have seizures. And coma, which of course can lead to death.
Now, so doctor, because there was a time in school, those days in university, where we say one of my friends being gets malaria, and later they talk say na eye fever, and all of a sudden she started misbehaving. You know, she was acting like somebody that was insane. We had to rush her to the hospital and all of that, and then they found out that it was malaria. So my question is, like, does it really get to that stage? And when person go start to act like saying get some itches for your head, and then does malaria, I don't know, does it get to that stage where we say you use drugs, you know, go work again? I don't know, because we've had cases like that where we say the person go on drugs constantly and it will not work.
Okay, really. There are two questions in one. Yes, the picture you painted can actually happen. Okay, it can actually happen.
Okay.
We'll call that encephalopathy.
What do you call them?
Forget about it. It's very important. So
you want to learn.
So that can happen. Okay, but in situations like that, the presentation could be diverse. Okay, but the most important thing is that such a person should be taken to hospital for proper evaluation and treatment. Okay. Then talking about
resistance to
yes,
drugs.
talking about taking drugs and not getting good results. Okay, it could be as a result of many factors. We'll still talk about that, but I must say some of them in passing. Number one is the fact that some of the anti-malaria drug we use today, okay, over time, the strains of malaria we have in this part of the world are beginning to develop resistance to them.
Okay.
Apart from the issue of resistance, you also have to deal with the issue of counterfeit. Some of the drugs that we take, okay, a lot of them are fake. Not just in this part of the world. As a matter of fact, it's more in Asian countries, okay? As we speak today, there's an area that borders between Cambodia and Thailand, okay? That today they have malaria that cannot be treated with any form of drug.
Wow.
The type of malaria that are beginning to develop in that place are said to be untreatable.
Why?
No drug can cure it.
Why?
Now, it is so because those people over time have abused
the drugs.
Not just drug abuse. They've been involved in a lot of counterfeit.
Oh.
Even the so-called artemisinin combination therapy, which is today is the mainstay of treatment of malaria. There's a lot of fakes around that part of the world.
Okay.
I think one study put it to about 40% of counterfeits. So they're battling with it. So people who are into counterfeiting of drug, you can see the degree of havoc that this can cause to humanity. Okay, of course, it can affect anybody.
Okay, doctor, let's pause here a bit while we open the phone lines. Slimmy,
yes,
make our people with their sense chook mouth.
Okay, so you know, we're blessing Achieve and I, as always. We'll open the phone lines right about now. Talk to us 08105434984 and of course 08173147589. World Malaria Day, now doctor they talk about. If you get any question relating to malaria, you are free to ask Dr. Bat. Doctor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, you can't talk about malaria without talking about the life cycle of malaria. Okay? So it's important to know. Now, how do humans get malaria? We've talked about the fact that it's a parasitic infection that is caused by a species of microorganism known as Plasmodium species. Of course, I've said there are about 5 of them that affects humans. Okay, but the most significant of them all is Plasmodium falciparum, which is said to affect in this part of the world in Africa, in WHO African sub-region, it's said to be causing malaria in about 97% of cases or higher. Now, next to the Plasmodium falciparum, okay, is Plasmodium vivax. That causes about 22% of infection in this part of the world. But in some other places, Plasmodium vivax actually predominates. Okay, in some places it could be as high as 70%, but not in African sub-region. Okay. Now, to talk about the life cycle of the mosquito, it's important to point out how we get infected by mosquitoes. I also would like to point out again that the type of mosquitoes that transmit malaria are called female Anopheles mosquitoes.
I know they teach us that one for school.
Now, the female Anopheles mosquitoes, there are over 100 species of them. There are over 100 species of them.
Okay, not just a particular female.
Not just a particular one.
Can't even tell.
Okay.
Wow.
If, for instance, you have names attached to them, this A, B, C, there are plenty of them.
But then they under female.
Yes. Yes, but they're all female mosquitoes. They feed on blood. They use blood as a meal, okay, with which to energize themselves and carry out their reproductive system.
If I still remember.
Yes, you can remember that. Now, the female Anopheles that cause malaria, okay, about 30 species of them have been identified as being significant. And when this mosquito bites...
Okay, we have Mr. Sorry to pause you. We have Mr. Chuku Emeke. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Yeah, doctor, is there any question for the doctor?
So I want to ask a question is that I have treated malaria for more than 3 times within a period of 2 months, and I'm still having malaria symptoms. What would be the cause?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chuku Emeke. Now, the picture you painted is what we see on day-to-day as clinicians. people will come in and tell you that they've used this drug, they've used this one, they've used the other one. Why is it not working? And the person still has symptoms. Okay, like we said in the beginning, sometimes one could have resistant malaria. Okay, now, but when you talk about resistant malaria, a number of factors can actually be responsible for that. Okay, number one is the type of drug you may have used. Okay, so for some people, out of personal experiences, they will tell you that this drug does not work for me, this drug does not work for me, this is the one that works for me. So somehow they railroad or guide either the pharmacist, whoever is giving them the drugs, or the doctor, to actually give them the one they prefer. But in reality, that may not be the one that will eventually work for you. Your past experiences, yes, but over time, because you have been on a particular drug, you develop resistance to that drug. So when you're giving such a drug, it will no longer work for you. So, but if we make a diagnosis of resistant malaria, okay, I must also point out at this stage that sometimes we tend to overdiagnose malaria. Most of the time, yes, overdiagnosis. Most of the time, when somebody comes down with febrile illness, when somebody has an illness that has fever, the temperature is high. Okay. Even without carrying out a test, the person thinks he or she has malaria.
And self-medication begins.
And pronto.
That's the mindset.
The person is already on malaria drug.
Because most times, doctor, I'm sorry, most times when you guys want to treat us for malaria, the first thing you do is to check our body temperature. So most times we believe once the temperature is high, we obviously have malaria. Yes,
such assumption can sometimes be erroneous. Okay, but anybody that does such assumption can also not be crucified because we're in a malaria endemic region. Okay, so that stands to justify such assumption. But all of that are being discouraged. We no longer want people, we do not want people to just go ahead and start buying anti-malaria medication because they think they have malaria symptoms. Okay, so there is need before you initiate any treatment, because a lot of this anti-malaria drug can be bought over the counter. Okay, so before you initiate any treatment for malaria, please and please make your way down to a hospital, a diagnosis center, and have yourself tested for malaria. Oftentimes, we will see, even when the person has gone to the lab to do a test, the result comes out MP, none, seen. So in a situation where somebody does not have malaria, the person still believes those symptoms that he or she is having are that of malaria. Okay? So, and of course, the person keeps taking drugs and drugs and drugs and thinking that this malaria is becoming stubborn. In actual fact, it could be another bystander, another disease that he has not thought of. Who says it cannot be typhoid? Okay, so before you initiate the treatment for malaria, please do yourself a favor, at least have a test done. Okay, that is what is regarded now.
Two questions now.
Advised.
Two questions now. The first one, sir, is there's this domesticated belief. We always think, say, the higher stage of malaria is typhoid. That's one. That's one person get malaria. So if you don't treat it well, you go turn typhoid. Then you see people who say, I have malaria and typhoid. That's one. I want you to shed light on that. Then number two, is there a point where a person go take malaria medicine reach due to self-medication anyway, where the medicine will go work again for him body?
Thank you very much. Let me start from the first one. Yes, that's the narrative we have in this environment. Oftentimes, people come into the doctor's office for medical attention, and when you ask the person, Madam, Oga, what's the problem with you today? The person will tell you pointedly, malaria. Doctor, I have malaria. It's not funny, but that's a fact. I've seen that plenty of times.
I'm laughing.
Doctor, I have malaria.
Some usually say malaria and typhoid.
Yes, usually for me, I will ask them, okay, no problem. You're not likely to be far from the truth. Okay, but I need to know those symptoms. Okay, sometimes they will even come with the test that they've gone to do elsewhere, and they have the test with them. You won't know. They are trying to ambush you.
Test most times.
Yes, MP and wider. By the time you finish, say, doctor, these are my tests. Okay, so they will tell you pointedly, doctor, I have malaria. Okay, so, but as doctors, we'll still go beyond that. Okay, if you think you have malaria, no problem. Let me have the symptoms. You will mention, such a person may mention symptoms that may not be the typical symptoms that you have in malaria. Okay, you could the person can mention some other. It's okay. Do you have this? Do you have that? The person says no. It's okay. Do you mind if we carry out a test for you? He said, no, I don't want you to waste my money. I know my malaria symptoms. Okay, so I want to say at this forum that there is no one particular symptom for Mr. A for malaria and another set of symptoms for Mr. B for malaria. Usually they have general symptoms that every human being may actually come down with. Okay, so the diagnosis needs to be made before initiation of treatment. Okay, and talking about your second question now.
Is there a particular point where you use a drug and it doesn't work, maybe due to self-medication?
Yes, that is all. When we talk about drug resistance, that is what brings about drug resistance. In a situation where you've been abusing a particular brand of drug, not brand now, a particular generic name of drug for so long, those periods that you've been thinking erroneously that you have malaria, and you actually, in most cases, you may not have had malaria all of those times, maybe few times though, and you've been in the habit of taking this drug, thinking that this is the one that works for me, your body gets used to it. Over time, resistance sets in. So that if you even have malaria properly diagnosed and you take those drugs, you're not likely to get the same results anymore or get good results as you were doing in time past. So that's one of the reasons why we usually ask people to limit their use of drugs, okay, on the basis of self-prescription. Now, talking about typhoid and malaria, are they caused? Does one transform into another? The answer is no. Okay, malaria and typhoid, I think the only thing, their common denominator is that they have symptoms that look alike. Yeah. That's the common denominator between two of them. They have symptoms that look alike, in the sense that someone who has typhoid may have fever, may have headache, may have abdominal pains.
Bad moss. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Fine.
Yeah, our doctor is here. Please go ahead with your question.
Is that I've been having malaria and I have the symptoms.
Can you come again, please? Say you've been having malaria.
Yes, I'm having malaria and I don't have any symptoms.
You're having malaria? Yeah. Who told you you're having malaria? Shouldn't you talk or your doctor?
Have you don't do tests to confirm?
Have you done a test, sir?
No, I haven't done a test.
You see what you just said,
so
doctor?
That's what we are saying. Before you make that diagnosis, before you're quick to make that diagnosis, please visit your doctor. Or probably on your own, you can go to a diagnosis center to have a test done, and then with the results.
Because I've been having some headache.
Okay.
I was about to ask you, Badmus, what did make you feel say you get malaria?
You get headache.
What be the thing that make you feel say you get malaria?
His volume is high. He just said he's saying get headache.
Okay, so you can see some of the symptoms. Yes, if you have headache, of course, for all you care, you may be correct. But what we are saying is that we should desist from using such methods, okay, based on assumption. Okay, so we should go about it in a professional way so that we don't develop drug resistance along the line. Okay, so but if you're having headache and you're having some other symptoms, my advice to you is to actually go and see your doctor. Okay, but quickly, I want us to talk about the life cycle of malaria parasite, because we can't discuss about malaria without talking about the life cycle. Now, there are two major aspects of the life cycle of malaria, okay, of the parasite now. Number one is the aspect that occur in the human body. That's the A part. And number two is the aspect that occur in the body of the mosquitoes. Okay, so we're going to link them up together. Okay, we have John from Bauchi.
Hello, morning, John.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
I am enjoying your program. I'm watching you in my house.
Thank you very much, Mr. John.
Okay, I have a question for Doctor.
Yes, please go ahead, sir.
Please go on.
Okay, my question is, should we wait until we have symptoms of malaria before we take malaria drug? As in, how often can we take malaria drug? And then there is this belief that once you urinate and it's yellow, you tend to have malaria. So how true is it?
Okay, thank you
Thank you very much for those multiple questions. And they're very
intelligent questions.
cogent questions. I must appreciate that. Okay, so let me start from the last one. The color of urine may give an idea. Okay, but beyond that, the urine itself needs to be examined. Okay, so the common test that we can use our urine, that we can do with urine is what we refer to as urine analysis or urinalysis. That can actually analyze to see the components, if the urine, but sometimes the color could depend on your state of hydration.
Because I'm about to say, on a normal, my own is always,
so in the days that you may not have taken plenty of water, your urine is bound to be concentrated, and of course that can change the color of your urine a little bit.
Speaking about urine, a man we drink plenty beer last night. Maybe down like 9 bottles.
Even when you wake up in the morning,
that actually causes diuresis. So you plenty urination will happen in such a situation. Talking about the alcohol
color of the beer will come out.
Okay, now but talking about how often should one be treated for malaria? Yes, there are two aspects to it. If you do not have symptoms, is there need for you to be treated? My answer is no. Really? But that no is not for everybody. That no is not for people who are under 5 years of age. That no is not for the pregnant women, for people who are pregnant. Okay? There's also an aspect of it that we call prophylaxis, especially people who have a non-immune individual, okay, who is traveling to a malaria endemic region.
Yeah.
Somebody who hasn't been exposed. Usually such a person should start taking some drugs 2 weeks before he makes such a trip to a malaria endemic region. Okay? And also, after leaving such a place, he continues on that medication for a while. That is called prophylactic treatment or prophylaxis. You're taking the drug not because you have gotten the disease, but to prevent yourself from having the disease. That can happen. We also do that prophylactic treatment for pregnant women. Okay? That's what we call intermittent preventive therapy that we usually do for pregnant women. Once they're on the second trimester of pregnancy, we'll give them sulfadozine pyrimethamine containing type of anti-malaria drug to take. We don't give it in the first trimester, but we'll give that in the second trimester. That is WHO recommendation. Okay. Now, such also should be given to children that are under 5. You don't need to wait. Okay. And then permit me also to point out that people who have some form of diseases, okay, should also be having prophylactic treatment of malaria. People who have sickle cell disease, it's advised that they should have prophylaxis for malaria so that they don't come down the disease, because if they do, the devastation will be high.
Excuse me, sir, before we move forward, genetic factors. There are some people who believe
a particular genotype.
Say maybe AA, they get malaria more than
as an A, they say, that's your sickness. That's regular.
Is that medically true?
Yes, I'll be surprised if that question didn't come up today, even from you or from viewers at home. Yes, that is true. That is medically true. But I will start from where we. Yeah, thank you very much. I'll start from where we stopped. I talked about people who have sickle cell disease. Yeah. Now, people who have sickle cell disease too, they are fortunate somehow in the sense that the plasmodium actually affects the red blood cells in the human body. But we'll see more of it when we talk about the life cycle shortly. It actually affects the red blood cells in the body. And when it affects the red blood cells, oftentimes it multiplies acidly within the red blood cells. The numbers can increase over time, over a small period of time. And of course, when the red blood cell bursts, it will spread it more, that it will affect some other red blood cells. But for people who have sickle cell disease threats, usually their red blood cells do not stay as long as that of people who do not have the problem, in the sense that they have a shorter half-life. Usually, in the course of circulation, the blood will pass through the spleen. So once the spleen identifies any red blood cell that is disfigured, usually the shape of a red blood cell should be biconcave. Once the spleen that identifies it, it pulls it out of circulation. Okay, so in so doing, it destroys it with the malaria that comes with it. So they have some form of partial immunity, which everybody in the population should have anyway. Okay, but people who have that disease, they rarely come down with malaria. Also, the genotype, talking about the genotype, is for the same reason, the AS and the AA. Okay, so it's for such reason. So there's genetic involvement. Okay, for some people, increases their partial immunity. We have Sheun from Oyo. Sheun, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. Please, I want to ask something about malaria.
All
Okay,
right,
please go
on.
ahead.
I noticed that whenever I have malaria. Good morning.
Yeah, we can hear you, sir. Go ahead.
I noticed that whenever I have malaria. Hello?
Go
Yes, we
on,
can hear
go on.
you. Go
Just
ahead.
turn down your TV volume. Speak on.
If I take, whenever I have malaria and I take drugs, I won't be ill. I don't know what happened until I take injection.
Okay. Yeah, I've had that countless number of times. Yes, you're somehow correct, my brother. Okay. Now, that does not, okay, I think I should take it this way. That's WHO classification of malaria. The classification is in two. Severe malaria, which is also classified as complicated malaria, and simple malaria or uncomplicated malaria. Now, if you have uncomplicated malaria and you take drugs, taking an ACT combination drug alone can actually take care of the parasites. Okay, but if you have severe malaria, you may need to do more than just taking drugs. Okay, so oftentimes we place such people. We may place them on some form of injections that we usually use to treat resistant malaria in this environment. We can place them on beta artemether injection or IM artemether injection. Okay, I don't want to call brand names here. Some of them are very good, and of course, when you combine them with oral drug, the person gets better. Okay, so but let's go back to the life cycle of the malaria parasite in the human body. Now, when we get bitten by an infected mosquito, what happens is that the mosquito, in trying to take a blood meal out of our body, it deposits some components from the salivary glands, from the saliva of the mosquito, into the human body, into our body, that are called sporozoites. Now, these sporozoites are tiny, tiny microscopic
organisms.
No, not organism per se. No, it's a stage now.
Okay.
We'll have that on our picture there. Okay, so these sporozoites will travel through the bloodstream and get to the liver. That will be the first bus stop. So on the left, number 2 there, you can see the human liver. Okay, so in the human liver, they will undergo asexual multiplication. They may you probably had like 1 or 2 that enter the system, but when it gets to the liver, it quickly multiplies. Now, this multiplication, this cycle will be going on. That is why it is not possible for someone to be bitten today with malaria and you come down tomorrow. You must have a time of processes. Okay, usually it will hover between 10 to 15 days after you've been exposed to an infected bite before you can actually start having symptoms. Okay, in situations where such a person will have symptoms. So in the liver, asexually, they will multiply in large numbers. When that happens, they will have what we refer to as merozoites. These merozoites, the aspect of the liver that they usually go into are the cells of the liver. We'll call them hepatocytes. Okay, so the merozoites will be in the hepatocytes in the liver. When they get multiplied, they burst the cells, and of course, gets into the bloodstream again. That's the number 3. When they get into the blood, the blood, they will enter the red blood cells. When they enter the red blood cells, the second stage or phase of multiplication will take place again. Asexually, they will multiply in their large numbers. When they do, oftentimes they will burst the red blood cells, release more, and then infecting large number of red blood cells in the process. Now, when that happens, we'll get to the 4th stage, which is the sexual stage, in which case we'll have Ekene from FCT.
Good morning, Ekene.
Hello, good morning.
Good
How you doing?
morning.
Yeah, the doctor is here. Go ahead with your question.
Okay, Doc.
Yeah, good morning, my brother.
Good morning.
Yeah.
I had an accident, fire accident, November last year.
Okay.
So after the treatment, so the body gets swollen. The place is the fire affected. It gets swollen and strong. So I don't know if there is any remedy.
Okay. Now I have a question for you. At the time you had the accident, did you go to the hospital, sir?
Yes, I went to the hospital.
Okay, but the swelling was not there at the initial stage.
No.
Okay. And did you have an open wound where you have the swelling now, currently?
No.
You don't have an open wound?
I have swelling all over the places fire burnt.
Okay, because a number of things can be responsible for such presentation. Sometimes when people are involved in accidents, they have open wounds. You could have glass debris or some stones being trapped within the tissues. Sometimes if as a doctor you don't clean the wounds properly, you can actually suture and cover them. Some will go so deep inside that you may not even be able to access them by just doing the normal cleansing that we usually do. So my advice is that you need to return to the hospital for re-evaluation. You could have a foreign body trapped within there. Okay, that's number one. Who says it cannot be pus collection? Okay, in which case, if it is pus that is collected there, you need to have an incision and drainage, I&D, done. Okay, but whatever it is, I think you need to go back to the hospital and show it to your doctors. Thank you very much. Okay, so we are returning to the life cycle of the malaria parasite. So the first stage, where they have invaded the blood cells, some of them will form gametes. We'll call them gametocytes. Okay, so you could have the female gametocyte, you could have the male gametocyte. It's at this stage that another mosquito comes again and bites you. Once the mosquito bites at this stage, this gametocyte, through the blood meal that the mosquito has taken, gets into the guts of the mosquito. By the gut, I mean the intestine. Yeah. When it gets to the guts of mosquito, it will undergo sexual replication. At this stage, within the guts of the mosquito, it will form ookinetes. These ookinetes will further transform to sporozoites, which will enter the salivary gland and they are ready to infect the next person. Sorry, I'm getting messages.
This junction, we say thank you
but
for
we are
today.
still going to continue from where we stopped.
Continue from where we stopped next week. Thank you very much, Dr. Bat.
Thank you very much.